Hi everyone, welcome to this live webinar session with two great educators. We have Wendy and Coralyn. So the floor is yours, Wendy and Coralyn. You can present yourself to the Moroccan audience, and then we can, start your presentation. And after that, we will get into the questions. We'll answer the questions that we have received from the audience and the questions that we are receiving in the live. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, everybody, we will use a PowerPoint. What we would like you to do is Coralyn and I are going to do our presentation first, and we would like you to use the chat box to put your comments and ask any questions. And once we've done the presentation, we will stop, and then we will go through the comments and the questions, all right? So let's have a look. Here we go. All right, so Coralyn and I are going to talk about effective implementation for an English learning program. Both Coralyn and I have done a master's that specializes in teaching English to young learners, which is from the age of about 4 to 5 up to about 17 years old. So that covers primary and secondary school in most countries. Right, what we have found as we have been training teachers and working with teachers over the last about 30 years is that there's a disconnect between policy and the reality in the classroom. Now, we specialize in supporting teachers because we are teachers, and we are there for the teachers. And what we want to know from you is, how much support do you need? So on we go. So some questions for you to think about in whatever context you are here with. So Aziz mentioned Morocco, but I know that there will be people from other contexts. So have a think about how many languages are native in your context, okay? What is the first language of your learners? And we know that that could be many, many different ones. And also, what is the language used as the medium of instruction in schools? Is that different from the child's first language? Now, this one is really important. How successful is the teaching of the language that is the medium of instruction? So the language that the children have got to use in school, do they really know how to use it? There are two links here, and this is for you to do afterwards, for you to check the results for your country on the results of reading. Now, the reason why we've used reading is that's literacy. So if the children don't know how to read, then the chances are they are not accessing the curriculum properly. But the PISA results are different. That is the medium of instruction and how well your particular country is doing. Now, not all of them are there, just telling you now, but it just gives you as a teacher an idea about all your hard work, where is it going? So, as English language teaching professionals, which all of us are, what do you think is needed for the teaching of English to be successful? Now, what we don't know right now is how many of you are primary teachers or secondary teachers or university teachers or even preschool teachers, but you are the people at the front line doing all the teaching. And so what do you think is needed in your context for you to be able to do your job really well? Do you need something? Do you need something more? So I just want you to have a think about that and to put some ideas into the chat box. So Coralyn's going to take over now.
So we're going to talk about some of our ideas at ELT Consultants. So way back in the 1980s, David Graddol was already talking about an explosion of learning English to children at that time. And we see today that his predictions have been confirmed. If we look at 1999, 2000, we see that English was already being introduced into sort of grade 3, 4, 5 as a starting point at primary. And by 2012, English had started to be introduced at grade 1 primary. And today I think it's true for us to be able to say that English is being introduced at preschool. So in order to implement language learning programs, you really need to be planning for the long term. And in order to do that, we need to be thinking about aims and values. So the first thing we need to be thinking about when we're designing a program is the learner himself, herself, the children involved. So what are the aims that we should have for English for our children? And what is it that you want your learners to be able to do in English? So you need to be thinking about your syllabus in depth. And what educational values might the English language learner bring to the learners? So for example, examples of values would be, for example, some countries are very keen on citizenship. Other countries may be more interested in developing international outlook for the children. Some might be more interested in the environment. And of course, these things can be brought into the syllabus and into the design of the course book. That's why we need to think about them very carefully beforehand. And in terms of the aims of English that we have for the children, it's sort of what level of proficiency do we think is going to be possible by a given grade. I've seen that some countries, when they introduce a reform, they're talking about bilingual. Others are talking in terms of the SEFR grades A2, A3, and now there's a special framework for young learners. So you need to be very specific in terms of what is it that to what level do you think children can achieve their proficiency, and also their development in terms of their social cognitive development, their intercultural development, their literacy development, their numerical development, their aesthetic development. So all of these things need to be thought about in detail in the long-term planning.
All right. Okay, so Coralyn has mentioned CEFRS, which is the Common European Framework of Reference. Now, this was very useful. It was actually designed for adults, but it has more recently, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, there is a young learner version of it. And it's basically descriptors of different abilities that you can do in language. And I think that is always useful to have. All right, now we also have to thank Richard Johnson for these particular different components that he has identified as factors for success in implementing a language program. He says that there are also societal factors, and we have to think about, well, what are these factors, such as public or media attitudes, which are already in society, that could be a positive or a negative influence on a language policy? So, you know, he's actually identified those as something in the newspaper or the television that says that this is a good thing or it's a bad thing. It could be a socioeconomic factor. For example, people in rural areas might think, well, why is my child learning English? They're never going to use this. There might be people who, you know, have migrated, or there's a religious reason or gender reason. There are lots and lots of societal reasons why it could work or not work. So we have to think about that. Provision factors. Now, as teachers, we also have to think about, well, what exactly do we need so that the policy you know, can actually work? So, you know, is it financed enough? So are you getting the right materials? Are you getting the right information as a professional in order to be able to do your job properly? Are the trainers that are working with you, is their English language and methodology at the right level? The teacher trainers also. So all of these things need to be considered in order to make the program in your country really effective. How many teachers are needed in your country in order that all the children can actually access this new program of English language? Are they all trained? Do they all have the right level of English? How many timetabled hours are in the school calendar? So again, thank you, Richard Johnson. So supply and training, continuing development of teachers, resources, technology, how many hours of allocation are given. They're all very, very important in order for English to work. So I'm going to hand over to Coralyn now.
So at the policy level, again, Richard Johnson has some suggestions for us. It's very important when we're developing a language program is that we build capacity within a country. It's not enough that trainers like Wendy and I should go in and then leave. We have to be able to make sure that the people that are left behind are perfectly capable and able to continue the program alone with the training that they've received and the understanding. So the capacity needs to be built within the trainers, the teachers, inspectors. Sometimes inspectors tend to get left out of the process, and the pedagogic advisors. And Wendy and I, both of us, believe in developing a pragmatic rather than an aspirational English curriculum. Now, what does that mean? A pragmatic is when you take into consideration the abilities and levels of where the teachers are at. What are they able to do? What is their ability? And also the context of the country, the resources and everything on the ground. That's the reality on the ground, as it were. Whereas an aspirational is more a dream situation whereby the curriculum is everything that anybody ever could want it to be without any regard to the reality on the ground. The next thing is a suggestion that all English teachers should be benchmarked at recruitment level. And the next thing to decide would be who will teach English. Will it be generalist teachers or specialist teachers? Now, some countries don't have enough teachers with a sufficiently proficient level of English, and will choose to take generalist teachers and train them up, increase their ability in English and methodology. Excuse me. Sorry, Wendy, could you just pop back for the last point for me?
Yeah, sure. So some examples of the processes that are needed for really effective implementation of language teaching are the planning, monitoring, research. So as you teachers, us teachers, of course, Coralyn and I are teachers as well, we're teacher trainers and trainers, there needs to be research to look at what we're doing and what works and what doesn't work, because we all want to know that what we're doing is making an impact. Piloting is really important, decision making, accountability, management of all the processes, international cooperation. So for example, British Council are very, very good at things like this. But ultimately, it's long-term sustainability, because at the end of the day, you need, as professionals, need to know that what you're doing is working. Now, here are some terminologies that we're going to use, some definitions we're going to use for the next few slides. So the word syllabus and curriculum we're going to use to mean the same thing. Young learners are children aged 5 to 12. Down means decisions made by policymakers, sort of ministry level, but they don't include teachers. And bottom up means decisions made based on teachers' abilities and input, but also teachers could very well be involved in the decision making. Joined up thinking means that all the stakeholders, all the people involved in education are working together. Aspirational means an ideal teaching situation, but it's not based on any known reality. It's what you would like to be happening, but you don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily exist in your context. Pragmatic means realistic, based on knowledge of teachers' abilities, students' abilities. Okay, Coralyn, are you ready to keep going? Or should I go a bit longer?
We're going to talk about some case histories now, so
Yeah.
I can, yeah, sure, I can go ahead. So before we move on to our case histories, we're going to just quickly look again at something from Johnson. When we have an educational program to introduce English, it's really quite complicated. And all of these people need to be basically consulting and communicating together. So you've got policy, which is created by the Ministry of Public Education and Finance. And they train the teachers, they get on top of the curriculum, the development of the materials, and they train the teachers. And they communicate with they should be communicating with central teacher training and retraining for the methodology. Then there is the assessment part of the ministry, and they need to be informed, because if the curriculum is changing, if the syllabus is changing, if the course book is changing, then the method of assessment obviously needs to change. So communication needs to happen at that level. And of course, if all of those things are happening, then communication needs to happen with the management of the schools. And of course, at the center of all this are the teachers, who at the end of the day are the most important resource. Without the teachers, none of this can happen. So Wendy, shall we move on to the next slide? Thank you. And of course, none of this is new. This is Bauer's spider's web. This is back again in the 80s. And Bauer was Roger Bauer was talking about this already. Here's a really nice diagram which shows the way in which all of these things are interconnected. And if any one of these things are missed out, then you're going to encounter problems along the way. So we're going to do, actually it's 4 projects, I think, Wendy, we're going to do.
Oh yes, sorry, yeah.
History of. And we're going to talk about these in terms of whether it's top down or bottom up, as Wendy explained in her definitions. So Wendy, do you want to talk about the first one, because I think it's one that you worked on?
Yeah, so all of these are anonymous for obvious reasons, but just to keep in mind in the back of your head is that a pragmatic approach considers the reality of the teacher's linguistic, the language abilities, and also their methodology abilities. And so they design materials to match the needs of the learners and the teacher's abilities. And this approach is often thought about as a bottom-up approach. The aspirational rarely thinks about the reality on the ground. So it doesn't think about, well, can the teachers actually speak English very well? And have they been trained on how to teach language? And this approach is often thought about as a top-down approach. So one of the projects that I worked on was very unjoined up thinking. The teachers were not trained at all. The policy said all our teachers will start teaching at grade 1. The curriculum was very quickly written, and materials of some kind or other were written again very quickly. I think the decision was made in May, and teachers basically in September had to start to teach English. They weren't trained, they didn't have materials, proper materials. This curriculum was aspirational, so it was way above the capabilities of the teachers. It doesn't think about, well, where the teachers are, what the learners are, you know, what can they do, even in their first language. Because grade 1, you know, the learners are just learning about their own language. The attempts to use ranged from 5 different course books, but the course books were way too difficult. There was a little bit of in-service training. Sometimes it didn't happen at all. It was provided by publishers. And the public assessment, so these children were going to have a public exam, and the content of the exam didn't even match what was being taught in the classroom. And this is just a classic example of totally unjoined thinking. You know, different ministries within an education system were not talking to each other. So it started as a bottoms up because there was a needs analysis to start it, but totally ignored that, and then ended up as a top down, saying, teachers, you will do this. This is what we have decided, you're just going to do it. My second example of unjoined up thinking, again, the teachers weren't given any support whatsoever, had to start at grade 1. The materials were developed without a syllabus. The syllabus was sort of added after 3 rounds of material changes. So the poor teachers were actually having to keep, the materials kept changing, and they had to keep learning new materials. They didn't have any chance to be trained with the materials. And it was just very difficult for them. So it started out with the intention of being pragmatic, but very soon it became aspirational as the ministry discovered the Common European Framework of Reference Descriptors and insisted that all the materials were updated with those descriptors, but the wrong level. There was no pre-service training for the teachers. Most of the teachers had a BA in literature or language, graduates, you know, so they could speak English, but teaching is a skill. You don't naturally know how to teach. In service training, there was a cascade model using supervisors, but some of those had never been teachers before. And the assessment department was working totally in isolation, and they designed assessment tests that didn't even match the new materials. So that project number 2 started as top down. Sorry, it started as bottom up, wanting to support the teachers, but it ended up as top down in the end. Then there was another one which is sort of semi-joined up, thinking the teachers were trained. Started at grade 1. The curriculum and materials were designed with great care after lots of needs analysis. The supervisors were trained on how to use the materials. The curriculum was designed by a committee which had teachers and supervisors, Ministry of Education, academics. It was pragmatic. Pre-service training, again, there was no teacher training at all. Teachers who had done a BA in literature or language, they went in to become teachers, but they weren't trained. In service training, only the cascade model using supervisors, some who'd never been teachers. And yet again, the assessment was not matching what the teachers were teaching. So this particular project started and continues to be from the bottom up, but time will tell. So this is now the 6th year. And some of you might recognize it because I'm involved with it right now. So, and I can see that some of you are watching and you might recognize what the project was. I'm going to pass over to Coralyn now.
Okay, so this project I consider to be semi-joined up thinking, and the policy was to introduce English at grade 4. And the decision was made to use some already published materials, but a great deal of thought was given to the context, because this was a very, very poor country, and the children had, you know, they were, many of them in the state schools were undernourished. They were below average child in levels of development. And so we took a grade 4 book, and we used a grade 1, a first grade book, and used it at grade 4. These materials were customized with the name of the country on the book, but they were essentially developed for another country, but they have been carefully chosen to match the circumstances as nearly as possible, because we weren't in a position to actually create our own course book at that stage. So this was an extensive ongoing training for 5 years. It really was longitudinal and very well thought out in terms of the training. So it was piloted in 3 different cities. Wendy, if you could just pop me some more information up there. And so there was preset training before the pilot started. This was done by the external consultants. And then there was extensive inset training every single year, again by the external consultants, and this was followed up also by mentoring. So throughout the year, the teachers would be visited, their classrooms would be visited by the external consultants, and they would be mentored and given another sort of inset training day. So this is a really well thought out in terms of the training for the teachers. And then there was extensive training for the inspectors as well in the methodology and training skills. They actually attended the teacher training and then got their own training in mentoring and how to be inspectors and support the teachers in a caring way, in a supportive way. And then also the school management was informed of all of these changes and involved in the process. But yet, unfortunately, once again, assessment was not taken into account. And so at the end of the years, they were assessed in the way that they had always been, which wasn't at all ideal. And so in that respect, it was only semi-joined up. and we cannot consider it to be totally pragmatic, although it went a long way in trying to be so. So it started off basically as bottom up very strongly. Unfortunately, even after the 5 years, it was looking very positive, but it fizzled out due to lack of funding and due to the political upheaval at the time in the country. So you know, it had a very promising future. So as we can see, you know, we need the teachers and the learners right at the center of the process. The curriculum department, which is involved with the course book development and the teacher training, needs to be closely linked with the supervisory department, the inspectors. It's no good if the inspectors go in and inspect in the old way and don't understand what they are seeing in the new methodology. This can be extremely disruptive to the process, and the same with the assessment department. They need to be setting the exams to match the methodology and the input, so that the learners can shine rather than fail because they're not being tested correctly on what they have learned. So do you begin to see now a pattern emerging from these 4 case histories that Wendy and I have talked about? There needs to be a joined up approach to training, and it really does need to include both preset and insets and need to be in alignment. And I would also like to add that I think mentoring is a really important part of that training. Too many training that we have seen where you go in and you train and then you expect teachers to suddenly change their approach to teaching without any support whatsoever. And we all know changing what you do is really very difficult without support. It's easy to give up. It's not easy to suddenly change, especially if you're an older teacher that have been doing something the same way for quite a while. So do you see a pattern emerging here? Also, a joined up approach to training and informing inspectors and senior school management to understand how language learning is different to other subject learning is needed. You know, teaching English is not the same as teaching maths or geography. It's not factual. It's something that is really a living subject, and it has a very specific methodology attached to it.
All right. So, yeah, some conclusions. English language teaching reform is here to stay. It's happening the whole time. Despite the pandemic at the moment, Coralyn and I are still incredibly busy because the Ministry of Education, well, they haven't stopped wanting to change, and now they've got to start to deliver their curriculum in a different way. There are some issues in English language teaching changes which have given rise to serious concerns. There's this compromise between aspirational of, you know, this is what we want it to look like, and the teachers, we pay them and they just have to do it. Well, it doesn't work like that. And pragmatic, you know, realistic syllabus. So what can the teachers, what is their language level? What is the teacher training level? What do they need in order to be able to move forward and be able to create some realistic English programs? So a thought just to finish this off is consult, which means seek information or advice from someone, especially an expert or professional. Shouldn't all the stakeholders in the education reform process have the responsibility to collaborate, communicate, and be involved? Join up all these dots in order for successful implementation of the reform to occur. So we're talking about the children, the parents, the teachers, you know, at all the different levels of involvement, and you are the professionals. So let's hear what your ideas are. So I'm going to come out of the PowerPoint sharing. And we'd like to hear your voices now. What do you think?
Okay, before we go to the question and answer session, I just have a couple of quick comments about what you just mentioned. You said that there are factors that should, affect the policy, right?
Yep.
It's not only the teacher. There are other factors, but we all the time blame the teacher. There are other factors that should be taken into consideration. What do you think we should do as teachers to change this policy, to make it work for better language instruction?
Okay, so at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, guess who's going to get the blame?
The teachers.
Always.
Anyway,
The teachers.
yes,
They will say it's the teacher's fault, they are lazy, they are not doing their job. But we know as teachers, because Coralyn and I have both been teachers before we were trainers, that we do our very best for our students, as do all the teachers that we know around the world. But if we are given a program that is too difficult for our students, and the assessment is not matching what we are teaching, we are in a very difficult position. So what should we do as teachers? I think we have to work together with other teachers to look at the materials we're given. We can't throw them away. It's part of our job to deliver that syllabus, but we have to make that syllabus match the ability, our own ability to start with, but also the abilities of our students. So if the syllabus is going too quickly, we need to make it to go to the speed of the children's learning, whatever level we're working at. I mean, I know cases of teachers working in secondary when English is introduced in primary, and they say, what can I do at secondary if the children come to me and they cannot read or write or speak or listen in English? And then they have to do exams. What can I do? Coralyn, do you want to add something?
I think really this is to assure teachers that if you've understood what we have been saying here, it definitely isn't your fault, because there are factors that have been happening without you knowing, without consultation, without your awareness, that have perhaps made the situation very difficult, as you can see from the descriptions that we've given. So it definitely is not the teacher's fault. And Wendy and I are always in awe of the teachers when we go to various countries and we train them, because we usually find them very motivated, so willing to take on the new methodology, because the new methodology normally makes one's life easier, better, more enjoyable, more satisfying. But we do understand, and we want to share that there are all sorts of considerations that have gone into that language program that perhaps the teacher wasn't aware of, and now they will understand the complexity of it and why these things are happening. And perhaps when you understand something, maybe that helps you better to understand that it's not your fault, and you mustn't be disheartened, because these things are beyond your control. They're beyond Wendy and I's control. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm just looking at the comments that are being made on the Facebook, and Fetten, who is a great teacher, she's saying, I think that as a teacher, I include more formative assessment throughout lessons to provide comprehension checks in context. I can stop and reteach as needed. And it's like, wow, that is a professional teacher talking. That is a teacher who does not just try and finish the course book because they've been told at this day you must be at this level, at this unit, and this day you must be at this unit. They are going at the speed of their learners, and if they think that the learners have not caught it, they stop and they teach again. And I think that's what you need to do. Hatem is saying, how would your program improve teaching in Morocco and other developing countries? Well, we write programs. So what we've just shown you is some ideas about what needs to be in place, Hatem. In Morocco, I don't particularly know that context. Coralyn might know a bit more than me, and obviously Aziz does. It has to be at the level of the teacher competency, and the teacher is only competent up to the level of their training.
Yeah.
So the teachers have never been trained for communicative skills.
Yeah.
And if the teacher's own English language level is not very high, but they have been told you will teach English, then that's not their fault. The teachers need to be empowered. They need to be given the skills to be able to do their job. Now we've got a really important person here that's joined us, a professional from Venezuela. We've got Rosa Lopez de D'Amico. Now we've been working.
Hi, Rosa.
We've been working with Rosa for the past 6 years in helping to develop the teachers in Venezuela in order to get the right linguistic level, but also the pedagogy. Now, what they've done in Venezuela is actually very innovative. They didn't have enough English teachers, so they asked people who had a degree, they were already postgraduate, who would like to retrain to become a teacher.
English teacher.
And a teacher of English. And so the program that Rosa is doing in Venezuela is retraining graduates to give them the language skills, but also the pedagogy, the how do you teach skills. Because just because you speak English does not mean that you know how to teach. It is a skill set.
Yeah. In fact, the better the English, especially when you are training at lower levels, the better the English teacher's level is. Very often the problem is that they are not able to bring their English level down enough and grade it enough for the lower levels of classes. And therefore, although their English is very good, it's not graded down. And that's a skill that is learned through training.
Yes. Yeah? Yes. No, we've noticed that quite a lot. The people who have good English language skills are selected to become teachers, and there's an assumption that because you know how to speak English, you know how to teach. And I'm sure that those people very quickly realize that when you go into a classroom, you need to have skills on how to manage all these students.
Yeah, classroom
and
management.
How do you effectively deliver your lessons? So Aziz, tell us about your experience.
Yes, please do.
Of teaching.
And then maybe we can contribute something.
What areas would you like to ask about?
What areas are burning issues for you?
Yes.
Yes, here is the thing. My first area is grammar. Grammar.
Oh, horrible. Hate it. Hate it.
Are you a secondary teacher, Aziz?
Yes.
Yes.
Grammar is there is a lot of pressure on us as teachers to teach grammar. You know,
Yeah.
it is tested in the exam, it is tested in the quizzes, it is tested everywhere. Okay. So the problem is that students don't, the structures don't get stuck in their brains, okay? We keep teaching the same structures over and over again, and they keep making the same mistakes. It's like an endless process.
Yep.
We sometimes I just wonder what's the purpose of teaching it in the first place.
So part of this immediately triggers something in my brain, is that you are teaching for an exam, aren't you?
Yeah.
And the exam is grammar based.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's a problem. We're not teaching.
You're not communicatively
yes, we're teaching the
teaching.
skills.
Yes. So you're
Yes,
teaching
but, for
about
example,
language. You're teaching about language, not how to use language.
Yeah.
we're teaching both about. For example, let me make myself clear.
Yes.
For example, in the back exam, the students are required to learn some structures like passive voice, how to form the passive voice. Okay, so here you should focus on the passive voice. You should focus on regular and irregular verbs. And as you have mentioned before, some students don't know the difference between regular and irregular verbs. So we have to repeat the process of teaching the difference between regular and irregular verbs.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of learning Latin at school, which is a dead language that nobody speaks.
Yeah. Or maths.
I love
formulas.
languages, and I speak quite a few, and I studied a lot of languages at school. But Latin, I hated it because it was dead. It wasn't taught in a way that was communicative. Why was I learning, I don't know, the passive or the past tense or whatever? Because it wasn't being used. And it seems to me that in many countries, and including Morocco, that's the way English is traditionally taught, like a dead language. And this is why kids are not interested. How are you going to get motivation in kids when it's... for what reason are they learning it? And this
to pass the exam.
Here is another. Yes, so here's another challenge for our language learners. Our students, when they go outside, the English is not spoken outside. Okay,
that's
right. They speak English as a foreign language. And
yes.
That's another. The only exposure to English is in the classroom.
That's
but when they go
Wendy
outside,
was talking about that earlier. Yes, if there's not a lot of exposure in the community, in the posters and adverts and TV, it is more difficult.
But teachers make a lot of effort. They bring activities, they bring songs, they they use games, but they are not enough. The student needs some sort of exposure outside the classroom.
Yeah,
they don't use English outside the classroom.
I've got some comments from Hatem, who says, I really like reading books about teaching English because they're useful. But when I come to my classroom and try to apply what I read in the books, things don't work most of the time. So I adjust and adapt things to fit my learners. I feel like I need a special method and a special content for each learner, especially that I teach in multi-level classes.
Is that Hatem from Sudan?
Is that Hatem from Sudan? Okay. And I think this is a very common problem. Now, when you learn a new methodology, you have to do it quite a few times before you as a professional, you as the teacher, feel comfortable in setting it up, and your learners learn the way that you want them to behave. So it's learner training. I remember the first time I set up pair work and group work, because I was a teacher for 15 years in Hong Kong in a state school, and I had classes of 45, and the first time I set up pair work and group work, disaster. The noise, the chaos.
I agree with that. I had a similar experience in Spain when I tried games with a class of very young learners.
Ah, no, Hatem is from Egypt. Hatem says that they're from
Egypt.
Egypt.
Okay.
But you know, you have to persevere, and you need to work with other teachers to work out how to do the procedures. Now, one of the things that I had a problem with when I first started teaching is other teachers complained that my classes were so noisy.
Yeah.
And I said to them,
Yes.
I am teaching language.
Language. And this is the difference.
Language is not silent.
Mm.
Language is communication.
Yeah.
Language is the tool of thought. It's how to make what's inside your head come out and share ideas. It is not silent. So this is a problem. How are we going to resolve this? And language is built on skills that start in the same way as a baby learning their first language. You listen, first of all, and you understand.
Yeah.
And then it goes to speaking, communicating, interacting, transacting, trying to get information, or presenting. And it goes to reading. Now, you cannot read well if you have not heard the language before or used it spoken.
Mm.
And you certainly can't write it if you can't recognize it when you read it.
Yeah.
So teachers who think they can skip the listening and the speaking and go straight to reading and writing because that's all that's in the exams have got a very big problem.
So it's a really vicious cycle. One ends up teaching to the exam because there's a lot of pressure to get the students to the exam, but that is so counterproductive at the end of the day.
Maybe you have mentioned pair work and group work. I love pair work and group work.
Good.
But here's the thing: sometimes the level of the noise gets beyond control.
Right. So Noma Sign is saying classroom management.
Yeah.
For learner autonomy, yes, totally. But classroom management for noise level. So you have to have some classroom management. You have to set the rules to start with. All the kids, whatever level, need to know some signals that if you start going like this or putting your hand up, the noise level is too high. So you have to have some signals for the children, what I call children, anybody under the age of 50. That's everyone. The learners need to know your signal for stop this noise now. You're too noisy. The best one is cross your arms, stand by the door, and just look at them.
What about adults?
Adults, the same. You cross your arms like this, stand by the door, and you say nothing. You say nothing until the noise level goes down. And then you ask them, why did I stop? You tell me why I stopped. Because unless they are aware of what they are doing, the cause and effect, they will repeat the nonsense the next lesson.
Yeah, this is your learner training, and it takes a while. It takes a while, and often teachers are like, "Oh, I'll just give up. It's too stressful. I can't do it."
Yeah.
So this is where mentoring comes in after the training. That you've got somebody coming in, looks at your classes. You can chat with them about the problems, encourage the teacher not to give up.
The teachers need support.
They need support.
My mother was a teacher from Scotland. And she was told that in the first term of teaching with a new class, never smile.
Really?
Never smile. Be very strict. Because she says the minute you smile, they think they're going to walk all over you. So she says, be really strict. Now, I can't do that. But I remember my mother coming into a classroom in Hong Kong, really, what I'd say naughty children. They weren't naughty, they were great fun. My mother walked into that classroom, and in 2 seconds, everybody was quiet. And it was like, oh, what did you do? What did you do? And she said, you just have to have something about your body language and the look that
Yes.
tells the students, we are here to learn and behave yourself.
Full stop.
But
yes,
having established that, you've got your enjoyable activities.
Yes,
but if
absolutely.
they get too noisy, then you have to come back to that rule, that gesture, whatever it is that you've developed, which brings the children back to, oops, we've gone too far, it's too noisy, etc. So it's learner training. It's classroom management, learner training. It can be done. It can be done.
Definitely.
I was working in a country, one of the case studies that we didn't mention the name of, but there was this, it was a Muslim country, and there were a lot of the work teachers are women, and there was a diminutive, very tiny woman in a huge class of boys. I think there were about 70 boys, and it was a very, very rowdy school. I had to have 2 bodyguards to walk me in. It was so rowdy. And she was fully veiled, so yeah, the whole thing, because it was a country that did so. And these boys, at the beginning of the time period that I was working with her, were completely out of control. And she was completely she was really a nervous wreck. But by the end of the training and the support, it was over a couple of years, I have to say.
Yeah.
I went in to watch that teacher, and she had that whole classroom like an orchestra.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable to watch because she was so tiny, and she was wearing a veil. And you know the situation of women in these countries, they don't have a lot of presence. But she learned the presence, and she learned the control. It can be done.
It can be done.
You just have to believe
but
it. But it's training.
The teachers need support in doing that.
Absolutely.
If they are changing the things that they do so that they are not afraid, they need somebody to be with them to keep reassuring them that what they're doing is correct.
Yes.
Which means that the teachers need observation and support, not negative observation feedback, like, oh, you did this wrong and you did that wrong. They need, so this was all really good. These things, what do you think went well? What do you think was not so good? And how do you think, what help can I give you to help you achieve your goals? So, you know, that's what teachers need. They need to be reassured that what they're doing when they're changing the methodology, that they're doing the correct thing. Because they will be afraid otherwise. And that's what Coralyn and I...
Coralyn mentioned something. Yes, Coralyn mentioned something very interesting. She said that teaching English is it's not like other subjects, like teaching geography or teaching.
It's not.
Yes,
it's a special methodology.
It's a living subject. So so the noise that we have in the classroom, I think it's healthy, right?
It is. Absolutely.
So just we should...
We call it good noise. There's a good noise level, and it's not out of a control level. It's when you know that the pupils, the students, are probably doing pair work, and there's this murmur, there's this noise as they're all talking at the same time, but you only have to look at it to see whether it's good noise or bad noise. It's bad noise when they're talking about football or something else in Arabic or something, That's when the noise gets out of control.
Now, Hatem said something. She said that when she sets her students group work or pair work, they switch to using L1. How can I overcome this problem? Well, it depends what they're saying in L1. Because if they are using high order thinking skills, it depends what what you want them to do. Now, if you want them to practice an interaction, have you set it up properly? Have you done whole class drilling? Have you done 50-50? Have you actually set up the activity for success?
Is the language on the board?
If you haven't, they'll give up.
Because they're bored.
They're bored.
Confused.
They're bored.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, what I found, I did some research about this in Hong Kong, and I actually had a microphone recording what my learners were saying, because I wanted to know what they were saying in Cantonese. I don't speak Cantonese. What they were saying is, what has she just said? What does she want us to do? Do you understand what she's just said? That's what they were saying. They were trying to negotiate between them to understand my instructions. So when you think that your students are misbehaving, think again.
Yeah, maybe they needed to see it again, hear it again, model it again. Was it clear enough? Did you have two students come to the front and show them, A says this, B says that, now change round, now another pair, now this half of the class is A, now this half of the class is B, everybody together, what's the question, what's the answer, right, now do it together.
Yep.
You have to go through that whole process first before you get them in pairs or groups.
So they really understand what you expect from them. Now, Fetton says that she notices that the young learners are well behaved when they enjoy a song or storytelling.
Ooh.
Yes. Oh, good, Fetton. I'm so glad that that's worked. Training has worked. Fetton is one of our students from Tunisia. And we just did a very big project there with storytelling.
Oh,
and
nice.
the teachers wrote the stories.
Really?
Yeah, beautiful stories.
Maybe you should guys start one in Morocco. Why not?
Why not? Why not? Anyway, I hope, Aziz, that we have been useful and we have given some ideas.
Yes,
for teachers.
One point for Coralyn. You said that you have the ELT consultant in Morocco, right?
Yeah, no, not in Morocco. I live in Morocco.
Okay, yes.
I haven't worked in Morocco. I know teachers.
So what kind of training is the ELT consultant do for?
What kind of training do we do?
Yes, yeah.
Whatever you want, basically.
So normally, we are invited to work with the Ministry of Education in a country that is wanting to undergo reform at secondary or at primary level, and we provide the training. We design the training materials. We can design course book materials. We do monitoring and evaluation of reform projects. We do every part of the aspect of any type of educational language reform.
And we're very happy to work
and Wendy also
teachers associations.
Yes.
Supporting teachers.
Yes,
helping other teachers. We're particularly happy to work with teachers associations.
Yeah, like this, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're happy to work and help.
That was a very interesting discussion indeed. Wendy, I also know that you are involved in some projects, Hands Up project.
Yes.
They are very interesting. Yes, with children, right?
Well, I'm particularly interested in the Hands Up project because I have been to Palestine, Middle Eastern, North African countries, Arabic, in the same way as Coralyn. We've both worked in lots of Arabic speaking countries.
Yeah.
And we understand the difficulties of children whose first language doesn't use the Roman alphabet.
Yeah.
Now, I've also worked quite a bit on West African, and so that actually includes sort of the Maghreb, the North African, Tunisia, Morocco, because you have French as
that French is quite a tricky thing.
However, the first language is
not French.
Not French.
No.
It could be a native language. It could be Arabic. It could be all kinds of different languages.
And I know from personal experience, I do a little bit of work in Morocco, which is voluntary work with an NGO, a Dutch NGO, working with Berber women from the Atlas Mountains who are studying English at the University of Marrakesh. And of course, because they live in the mountains, they have to have shelter. And so the NGO provides them with a safe home in Medina, and they go to university. Yeah, so they're in a protected environment. They're women away from home, and they're very young women. And I provide extra English classes. Other people provide extra French classes. And one of their big problems is, of course, that they haven't learnt French in the mountains, in the Atlas Mountains. French was not the language of their instruction. And when they come to the university, everything's in French. So not only are they coming to do their studies, they suddenly have to learn French to a level that they can absorb the content. So that's very interesting for me.
Okay, good. So have you learned any phrases, Moroccan phrases, or just a little bit?
Islama? No, I know some. I know some greetings and kifek, alhamdulillah.
Okay, that's good.
The best.
Yeah, okay. That was a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for this lovely session. Well, do you guys have any final comments for the Moroccan audience? Any tips, any advices?
Well, you seem to not just have Morocco here. You've got Egypt, you've got Venezuela, you've got Tunisia, you've got a lot of different teachers listening in. I would say teachers help other teachers, work amongst yourselves. If you are not being given the support in order to develop, you need to join teachers associations so that the teachers help other teachers like this setup as well, because that's the only way that you're going to develop.
Yeah.
I have on my in ELT Consultants, but also my own Facebook, I have given lots of links to free courses that the British Council have got at the moment. Coralyn and I are doing one on the Future Learn platform, and they are fantastic 6-week courses. Brilliant. Wow. Please go and do them.
Amazing.
They're free.
You understand?
Yes.
Aziz, the link.
Yes, you just can send us the link to share it with the teachers.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's a really good course.
Yes.
So thank you so much for this lovely discussion.
Thank you for inviting us.
And I really hope maybe to see you in a future webinar or something. Or maybe you can visit, maybe Wendy can visit us.
Well, I would like to visit you, but they won't let me out of Marrakesh, and they won't let you from Agadir. We have to wait until we can travel again.
Yes, okay. Thank you again so much, and see you next time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.